All righty. What is going on, everyone? Welcome into this week's edition of GC Live, or today's edition, I should say, of GC Live. I'm Jack Veltri. I cover football, basketball, and baseball for GamecockCentral.com. And on this week's edition, or today's episode of GC Live, we are going to be breaking down what I heard and what other media members heard in South Carolina's offensive and defensive player availability on Tuesday and Wednesday. And then we're going to get into some of your hot takes. Some of the subscribers on GamecockCentral.com, they messaged their biggest hot takes of the 2024 football season for South Carolina specifically, and what they're expecting and what they hope to see. And so I reacted to most of them with a buy and sell story on GamecockCentral.com. So if you haven't already, go ahead and read that story. It's a good one, as I give some in-depth on what I think. But I didn't get to all of them. So what I'm going to do is later in this live stream, I'll get to as many as I can of the other hot takes that I didn't get to in my original story. But yeah, it should be a good one. But before we get going, I want to talk about our first and only sponsor of the day, Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. If you're in the market for a home or you're looking for help with your mortgage, Clint is your guy to call. He's a Gamecock fan, a big supporter of Gamecock Central, and he's a local guy, so he gets it. And, the home housing market right now, I mean, look, I'm not currently looking for a home. I'm living in my apartment, happy as can be, despite rent going up and all that. But, the housing market, if you're looking for a home, this is your guy to call. The number to call him is 803-422-6797. And you can also go to ClintHammond.com, and the NMLS number is 71597. He's helped out our very own Wes Mitchell. I know he helped out former Gamecock quarterback Perry Orth in the past. So nothing but good things about Clint. And so that is all from Mr. Clint Hammond of CMG Home Loans. So, all right, without further ado, if you're just joining us, welcome in. Happy Thursday. One step closer to Friday and then the weekend. And for South Carolina football this weekend, Gamecocks are playing their second scrimmage of fall camp on Saturday. Should be a big one. I think South Carolina is playing sometime Saturday afternoon. Don't have the exact time on me, but I'm pretty sure it's somewhere around like 2:50. But it's a closed practice, closed scrimmage. So either way, doesn't really matter much for us fans, reporters, all that, since we can't really go. However, we will hear from head coach Shane Beamer following the scrimmage on Saturday afternoon, and won't be live streamed on South Carolina Athletics YouTube, but there will be live updates and coverage from GamecockCentral.com if you're interested in looking at that and hearing what Coach Beamer has to say, because I'm sure it'll be an interesting one. Not sure exactly how it's going to go, and we have a comment here from Will Korb who asks, any Nick Harbor news? He making plays in practice. So the way it works, I'll give a quick breakdown real quick before we really get into media availability and all that other stuff. So the media is able to go to select practices, throughout fall camp. And the last one we were able to go to of the entire fall camp was this past Sunday. And we went for about 6 periods, which it's 5 minutes per period. So about 35 minutes we were there. And we got to see Nick Harbor out there returning some kicks. And then also saw him make a few nice catches. I know he had a good one from Davis Bevel, who made a kind of a high throw, but Nick was able to go out there and make a really nice lunging catch. And for a guy like him, it's an easier catch because he's a bigger guy. But so far, so good with a guy like him, and it seems like he's done a pretty good job in that receivers room. How that's going to end up shaking out with who starts or whatever, still kind of up in the air right now, it would seem. But a lot of guys are making a good impact and good impression. Now, as for how the scrimmage might look on Saturday, I think it's going to kind of be the same baseline as what we heard about on this last Saturday, the first scrimmage. A lot of guys are going to get in, a lot of rotations. But I think at the same time, it's more of an opportunity, I feel like, for the younger guys to probably play. Because at this point, you're about halfway through fall camp, or by this point, probably more than halfway through fall camp. I feel like coaches are probably going to have an idea of who they want starting, what the depth chart might look like, and that's something we probably won't see until game week against Old Dominion and all that. But I think for right now, I feel like they probably know where they're going to go with starters and two deeps and all that. But again, it's another opportunity for guys to knock some of the rust off. Like a guy like Rocket Sanders, is he going to play on Saturday? We'll have to see. I would lean towards yes. It just makes sense, right? Because he doesn't play in the first scrimmage, and the main reason for that was just not wanting to, get him hurt or anything, or rush his getting back process, which I get. That's cool. But at the same time, it's like at some point, you want to get him into game action as best as you can. And what better opportunity than to do it in a scrimmage, whether it's 5 snaps, 10 snaps, 20, you have to play him. And right, I mean, Craig Godwin says Rocket has to play some. I totally agree. He needs to, and it seems like he's doing well in practice. We'll get into some of the what these guys said from media availability here in a sec. Starting off with Rocket, what Robbie Ashford, South Carolina quarterback, had to say about him. Very good answer. But I think right now the key is, okay, where's Rocket going to be after Saturday? Did he play in the scrimmage? How did he look? How's he feeling? And if he didn't, what's kind of the reason for that? Is it, not wanting to get him hurt? Because, I mean, there's so many running backs around the country right now. You look at Texas, for instance, 2 of their top running backs are out for the year with injuries. So I think that's kind of probably what the concern is. You don't want to get a guy hurt that's just coming off of injury, but you got to rip the Band-Aid off at some point and play the guy. And for me, I would do it on Saturday. So let's check out what Robbie Ashford, South Carolina quarterback, had to say about Rocket Sanders at Tuesday's offensive player media availability. Really good answer.
Me too. Where's that right now?
Things I've seen these past couple of days, it looks like Rocket Sanders is coming back. It looks like the Rocket Sanders I saw that ran for about 180 on us at Auburn. I mean, man, just for him to be that big, I mean, you see a guy that big in the backfield, and he could just cut on a dime, cut like he's a 5'9", 170 guy. Like, it's insane to see, but it's like I'm grateful to have him on my team and not having to be the one against him like I was before, because I know how I can go. And but man, he just came in and worked ever since he got here. Just rehabbing, and it's just to see all the work he put in just transpire on the field. He's still getting back into it because he'll tell you he still doesn't feel like himself completely, but that just takes reps. I mean, he missed the whole spring, had surgery, but man, Rocket Sanders, to me, that's the best running back in the SEC, and I think he's going to show a lot of people why. But, man, I'm grateful and excited to have him on the team, love him. I mean, just a great guy. I mean, he was one of the first people. He was honestly one of the reasons why I came here too. So, I mean, just to see him, man, I'm excited for him. And I know it's going to be a great season for 5.
Yeah, so that was Robbie Ashford, South Carolina quarterback, competing for starting reps right now with Lenore Sellers. And look, I'm sure everyone thinks that Lenore is probably going to be the starter, me included, probably will be. But again, a guy like Robbie, and we'll talk more about him in a second from something else he did bring up. But from what he said about Rocket Sanders, it's a great sign that it seems like Rocket is doing very well right now in camp, getting back to the Rocket of old. The big thing that has been, going on with Rocket, obviously he didn't play in the scrimmage the other day, but Beamer did say afterwards that he's 100%. It's just you want to get him off his feet because he's been going at it very hard, and you don't want to rush him back or anything and, possibly re-aggravate any injury like the shoulder one he's going through, or had been going through, I should say, because he's back now. But it is a great sign to hear that Rocket has been looking like Rocket. I think a lot of people are high on what he can do. The run game for South Carolina has been very mixed, I would say. You have your years where it's like Kevin Harris rushes for over 1,000 yards one year, and you had your Marcus Lattimore years and your Mike Davises and all that good fancy stuff, and even Deebo Samuel, a guy like that who can do it all. Then you get last year where it just wasn't good enough, right? Mario Anderson had his flashes. Now he's at Memphis. had some good games. But then your next leading rusher is, no offense, great guy, great player, did a lot of good things for this university. To carry on Joyner's your next best rusher, that's a guy that, again, credit to him for moving over from wide receiver to running back last year. But that's a guy that came to South Carolina as a quarterback. All right, it's a long time ago, back to 2018 or 2019, whatever year it was when he was a freshman. But Joyner came here as a quarterback, so to make all that transition and then play running back his final year, obviously it had some moments, but for the most part, it was very tough. And so South Carolina didn't have a consistent running game at all last year, and it affected the way they played. That's why they went 5-7. This year, I think it's going to be totally different. You got guys like Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway, DJ Braswell, Jawarn Howell, even Matthew Fuller continues to make a big impact so far in camp. So I think you have a lot more depth, a lot of guys that can go out there and do it. And with Rocket, I mean, I spoke about it in my buy or sell story. I got one of the hot takes was Rocket's going to rush for over 1,000 yards. I see it happening. I think between him and Attaway, they can definitely get to that 1,500-yard mark, if not more. And I think a lot of what South Carolina is going to do this year is run the football, because whoever's at quarterback, I think there's going to be moments where you're facing a lot of heavy pressure from defenses. And again, whether it's Ashford, Sellers, Bevel, whoever the case might be, they don't have that SEC year after year starting experience. So it might take a little bit of time, even for a guy like Sellers, despite how good he has been, to get going right away. And one thing to kind of help alleviate some of that stress is running the football. And I think if you're able to run it consistently with the guys you have, it's going to be a really, really solid year for the offense. And it just helps, like I said, take that pressure off a guy like Lenore Sellers or Robbie Ashford. Now, Robbie did talk a little bit more. He had a lot of great quotes. That guy, he has such good quotes, man. Just really in-depth answers. And that's something I really appreciate as a journalist. And he was asked about the starting quarterback battle a good bit. And elephant in the room, Lenore Sellers, more likely than not, probably going to be the starter come week 1. But that doesn't mean Robbie won't be playing at all. There is always the potential, and he hinted at this a little bit, that maybe South Carolina runs maybe like a 2-quarterback system, not like a full-on one, but like one where, when you're in like a 4th and 1 situation and you need that extra yard, and maybe you don't want to use one of your best players and get Sellers hurt potentially. I think that's a time where Robbie Ashford's a big dude, big, sizable, speedy guy. Maybe he goes in there for that short yardage play and gets that extra yard. Or maybe they have specific packages in mind for him. So I think with Robbie, I would expect him to see some playing time if he's not the starter. Maybe not, every drive, but maybe there's specific moments where he can make an impact. And I think he's going to be a really good add for this team. So here's a little bit on what Robbie had to say about what could be in store for him this year.
Is there talks about the other one playing a little bit or getting some snaps?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. It's kind of just a coach thing. I don't really look too much into that because, that's not really my place or anything. I just try and go out there and just do what I can. Hopefully I do enough to be able to see the field. I mean, at the end of the day, who doesn't want to play? And, I always want to be on that field. So I'm going to do whatever it takes. The North is going to do whatever it takes. And, at the end of the day, we're only making each other better. And, this is the SEC. You never want to see injuries happen, but you always got to have a next man up mentality because you're one play away. Whoever the backup is, you're always one play away from being in the game. And, a lot of places, when you don't have 2 quarterbacks ready, that's where a lot of teams get in trouble. And we've got 2 quarterbacks that are ready and another 3 guys that are ready on top of that. So I feel like it's just a recipe for success. And I feel like the coach will make the best decision, and I respect the regard.
So that is a little bit on what Robbie Ashford had to say when asked about the potential of him seeing some snaps this year. And Travis Edwards brings up a good point. Robbie will be used in obvious QB run situations to limit hits taken by Sellers. I think that is the obvious kind of answer as to what type of playing time Robbie would see. Barring an injury or anything, I think Sellers is the guy through and through. He's probably going to be the guy all the way through this entire season, and then next year too. And that's the great thing about him because he's the future of this program. But let's say, I'm not trying to say this is going to happen or anything. I don't want it to happen. You never want to see injuries. But say Sellers gets hurt. You have a guy that can go out there and do it. Robbie Ashford can fit that mold. And I think for him, he's someone that has been around, been at Oregon, Auburn, both weird situations there for him. Now he's at South Carolina where he said it's the best quarterback competition he's ever been a part of because it's really healthy and it's not guys going up against each other, pinned up against each other, all about me. It's, Sellers and Ashford and Bevel and all these guys, Reno. They're all about, okay, what can we do to make each other better? How can we help one another? And with Ashford, he said that Sellers is kind of like a little brother to him. And I think that's really cool to hear about. So, but yeah, with a guy like Ashford, he's valuable. And I think a lot of people, probably sleep on him a little bit maybe just because the Sellers hype is through the roof. And I get it. And a lot of people are saying, well, Ashford's not going to play this year. I would beg to differ. I do think he will see some time on the field this season. Another guy that who knows what his role is going to be, Juju McDowell. That's a guy that in a loaded running back room, he's a guy that is probably one of the older ones, definitely older in terms of being at South Carolina the longest. He's a senior. He's coming off an injury he suffered at the end of the year last year. And who knows what his role is going to be, right? Because you have guys, like I said, Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway, DJ Braswell, Jawarn Howell, Matthew Fuller. All these guys, they could. I don't know how the depth chart's going to really shake out. But if I had to guess, Oscar Attaway and Rocket Sanders definitely going to be playing more than Juju McDowell. But I feel like that third spot in that running back room, however you want to divvy it up, I think can definitely still be up for grabs. And I think Juju might fit that role. But he also might be a guy that maybe you see him on special teams this year, whatever the case might be. But here's a little bit of what Juju said. It was a funny, but also very great answer on what he expects and what fans can expect from the South Carolina offense this year.
What can you tell us about how this offense is coming together and what it might look like here in a few weeks?
Popcorn. That's all I can say. Yeah, get it ready.
And look, that's not really a surprise that you get an answer like that. I think with this South Carolina offense, the identity, I feel like is still to be determined. For me, I think they're going to be running the ball a lot. I think that's just kind of what the bread and butter will be this year. But I think you're also going to see Lenore Sellers be able to sling it and throw the rock like he has been, in the few reps that he has had in real game situations last year. But like I said, I do think what South Carolina does this year starts with the O-line blocking up front for one, and then what the run game does. And if it all works out the way I'm making it sound here, it could be a really fun year for this offense. And I don't know if they're going to be able to keep up with teams like Ole Miss and Alabama and teams like that can be really high-scoring groups. But I do think South Carolina, combined with what I believe they can do on defense, I think this could be a year where we're thinking maybe – I think they got 4 guaranteed wins right now. I think you got Old Dominion should be a win, no doubt. Akron, Vanderbilt, and then Wofford. Those are your 4 key lock-them-in wins. If South Carolina lost any of those games, I think there are bigger problems going on with this football team that we're just not aware of. But with the rest of the schedule, it's like I think you got about 5 games that are really up for grabs. Specifically, you're looking at Kentucky, LSU, Clemson, A&M, and Missouri. I think those are all games that really could go either way. 3 of them are at home. That's a big deal. And then Clemson, obviously, right down the road. And then you got your 3-game stretch of Ole Miss, Bama, and then Oklahoma. And I think that's a really tough stretch. If South Carolina manages to somehow win 1 or 2 of those games, I think that's impressive in itself. And again, I think it really lends itself well to the possibility of winning 6 games and doing something more. Because a lot of people are going to say, oh, this team's going to win 4 or 5 games. That's it. I really do think they can get 6 wins at it's not even the ceiling, I think, for this team. The ceiling, in my opinion, probably 7 to 8 wins. I do think South Carolina typically gets wins when no one expects them to. I look back to 2022 is a perfect example when they're coming off a 38-6 loss to Florida in Gainesville. Everyone's counting them out. I think my prediction for that game was the next game was Tennessee was going to score 63 points on South Carolina. And lo and behold, South Carolina goes out there and does the complete opposite, scores 63 points on Tennessee, and then goes to beat Clemson the next week. So my point is this team, you never know what you're going to get on a week-to-week basis. It could be really bad. It could be really good. How they go about getting more wins than not, it's just going to come down to how the offense looks and what the defense does as well. But speaking of the defense, here's a little bit of what fifth-year edge and defensive end Kyle Kennard had to say about what this group could look like on the defensive side of the ball in 2024. It's another one of these crazy answers, but if you believe it, you might buy into it after this.
That's how good I think it will be.
How good you?
Like I said this before, man. I think we have a chance to be very historical. Is a word I used before, and I use that word again because I'm not shying away from it. We have a lot of talent. Not only with talent, we have depth, and we have guys that are willing to work hard with their talent. And I feel like just with the blend and all of that, we could be unstoppable. The sky's the limit. No cliche talk. The sky is literally the limit.
So let me say this. First off, I respect anyone that can go out there and have the confidence like that to feel as good as he does about this group. I mean, look, Kyle Kennard is around this team more than 99.9% of us, and he sees what it's like on a day-to-day basis. He sees what they're working with on defense and what Clayton White is cooking up. And I do think they can have a good year. Now, historical, that's a big jump from last year to this year, right? I think some of the main issues that I saw last year, the pass rush wasn't good enough. You had the least amount of sacks amongst SEC teams with 21. You struggled to stop teams on third down and also a little bit on fourth down, and you couldn't create turnovers consistently. The big thing was that you just couldn't get off the field consistently. And so I think with this team, with this defense, we saw what they did in the final 4 games of last season, right? They hadn't forced a turnover in well over a month, and then Jacksonville State game comes around, you get a few turnovers, and it all just kind of snowballs from there into a good rest of the month, despite losing the season finale against Clemson in a game where you probably should have won had your offense been clicking. But I do think defensively, I'm thinking they're going to be better. Historical, I think that's kind of up for debate. I don't see it, but I do think historical. When I think historical, I'm thinking NFL draft picks right and left on the defense, breaking all sorts of records. I don't see it with this defense. I think they're going to be good. I don't think they're going to be shattering the single season, turnover record, or I'm just making up random things here, anything like that. But in terms of being better, for sure, I could definitely see that. And Travis Edwards comments again saying, Jack, this ain't last year. Nothing from last year has to impact this year. Right on, my man. Right on. I like that. And it's true, right? Whatever happened last year, the cool thing about sports is that you have a new slate every single year, a clean slate, a chance to start fresh. And look, whatever they did last year, obviously wasn't good enough. They went back, you talk about offensive line specifically, defense. They were looking at things that went wrong last year and trying to correct them for this year. So I kind of agree that last year doesn't really matter that much. But at the same time, a lot of these guys from last year's team are still around and going to be big players. So I think they're looking at, okay, what did I do wrong last year? How can I fix it and correct it for this year? So that's the only aspect I'd say where it kind of matters a little bit. But other than that, I do think last year really doesn't matter that much because a lot of new guys are on the team and whatnot. But speaking of another defender on the team, Craig Godwin says Jules is a monster. And I am glad you brought that man up, Craig. Here is a good quote from DeAndre Jules, South Carolina defensive lineman from Pitt, transferred over this offseason. He talked about so he mentioned, I asked him who are some of the guys that we're not talking about enough on that D line that maybe deserve a little bit more praise. And he brought up guys like Nick Barrett, and then he brought up himself. And I asked him a little bit further about why he thinks he slept on, and here's his answer.
You talk about yourself being one of those guys that slept on right now. What makes you feel that way, and what do you feel like you really want to prove this season to people that might overlook you?
I feel like I need to prove that I can play in the SEC. I can be one of those guys that's talked about in the first, second, third round, and I feel like with this team, it will help me boost my notoriety and my name, especially after we win games this season.
And I respect an answer like that. That's another good one where it's like, why do you feel like you're slept on? And Jules' answer made complete sense, because he's a guy that he talked to the media about. He wasn't getting the heaviest of draft looks when he was at Pitt last year. Good player, but obviously not enough to be one of those NFL draft pick caliber guys. And so coming to South Carolina this year, it's not like playing the ACC isn't noteworthy in itself, but playing the SEC, like he pointed out, is a little different. A lot of eyeballs are going to be on the SEC this season. And I think with Jules, if he has a good enough year, like if he puts it together, I don't know about like first, second, third round pick, but I do think he's more likely than not going to be drafted if he has a good enough year. Whatever stats he's going to put up, I'm not sure. But I think if they're good enough and he's showing progress this year, that he can compete in the SEC and stuff like he said he wants to and hopes to, then I think the sky's really the limit for him. And I think you could say the same for a lot of those guys on defense. Wanted to lastly touch on the offensive line. That's another thing with this team. And I know last year doesn't really matter in terms of this year, but with the offensive line, I think you can argue that last year what they did kind of matters, because quite frankly, the offensive line wasn't good. You got 41 sacks. Your offense can't really run the ball efficiently at all, like I talked about before. And a lot of it has to go hand in hand with the blocking you're getting up front. And there were so many injuries last year to where you're mixing and matching what the offensive line combination is going to look like every week. And it just never was consistent. So Casey Henry, really bright, young, smart offensive lineman for South Carolina, who will be competing for starting reps at right tackle again this year after going down with an injury after winning the starting job at that spot last year. He talked a lot about what has gone right for South Carolina's offensive line in scrimmages so far. He did say the biggest difference this year versus other years is there's a real sense of eagerness amongst the whole line to be better, to play and compete and all that good stuff. I think it will translate over to the field. I do think the offensive line, one of the positions that is going to be better this year, for sure, but we're going to have to see what happens. So here's what Casey Henry had to say on the offensive line's progress so far in camp.
I thought we came out and we looked very comfortable on the field, and I thought it was good that we meshed together really well on the field. I thought the run game was really explosive, and I thought we did good in the pass game as well. And I thought that there was not a lot of skill drop-off between the groups when we went out, like we rotated groups and stuff. I thought everybody played well together, and I was really impressed with how we did overall.
And it's good to see that the offensive line seemingly is doing very well in camp and stuff. And again, we're taking what these guys say and basing our opinions of what this team is going to look like off what we see from them in camp and what we hear about them. And it does seem like, we've asked a lot of these guys, not just the offensive line, but just different position groups about what they're seeing from the OL. And it does seem like they're doing very good and giving a lot of protection, and they're able to run the ball efficiently, but we're not going to really know what this thing looks like until week one. You could say that for a lot of different facets of this team. But yeah, offensive line, definitely expecting a better year from them. And who knows what the starting five is going to look like. Kaysen did say they're rotating a lot of guys in and out and creating different combinations, and it seems to be working. I think I spoke to Lonnie Teasley a few weeks ago, and he was saying if you're in the two deep, you're going to be quote unquote a starter, you're preparing like a starter is kind of what he meant. And who knows what it looks like. I would be interested to see if any, maybe the freshmen or the younger guys play. Marquis Anderson, what's he going to look like? He's another guy that didn't play in the scrimmage this past Saturday. Will he play a bit this year? I would imagine so. It seems like he's made a lot of progress in camp. You have to look at the O-line like this. Probably Vershawn Lee's probably going to be at center starting. Ja'Kai Moore, the most experienced starter on this team, probably at left guard. Where's Tree Babalade going to play? Is he going to be at left tackle? Is he going to be on the right side of the line? Who knows? Is Casey Henry going to be back at right tackle this year? What about some of these transfers? What about Kamar Bell? He's been working on the left side of the line. What about him? What about a guy like Torselli Simpkins, the third? What about a guy like him? There's a lot of different players on this line. What about Josiah Thompson, too? He's been making impressions. So my point is there's a lot of guys that could potentially be starters right now, and I'll be interested to see what it ultimately does look like for week one. I don't know for sure right now, but I think we'll get a better indication of maybe what some of these position battles and starting groups might look like after this weekend, hopefully. So that's all really from players. We heard from a lot of guys, but that's kind of the main takeaways I had and main points I wanted to talk about today, just because they seem to be, for one, the most interesting to talk about, and number two, just really good responses from these guys. I feel like some guys, not to knock on anyone, but I feel like some players really keep things close to the vest and don't give away a lot of important details, which I totally understand. Like, it makes sense, because why would you want to give away? It's like giving away your entire playbook. Why would you want to give that away before the season starts? Keep things under wraps. But again, it's nice to have some crumbs and little details, at least reading between the lines of what things are kind of looking like right now, because it helps paint a better picture of, okay, this is probably what this team could look like for the 2024 season without really seeing a whole lot. So that's all from that side of things. We're going to now jump into some of the hot takes that you guys on GamecockCentral.com on the Insiders Forum had left for me to debate on whether or not to buy or sell. I answered a lot of them in a story earlier today on GamecockCentral.com, which you guys can go ahead and read. It's a good one. Includes, I don't even know how many hot takes. It's a lot of them that I answered. So, but there are a few that have been coming through over the last few hours after I wrote the story, and a few that I didn't answer as well. So I'm going to try to answer as many as I can here and make sure everyone feels included and stuff. But one of the first ones I'm going to read here is from Mac1906. Gamecocks have 2,000 plus rushing, 3,000 plus passing, 25 points per game allowed on defense a game, and they get 8 wins this year. So I think that's a lot of different things that this team's going to do this year. I'll just break it down real quick one by one. And I probably won't give as in depth as I did in my story, but I'll try to give a general consensus of how I feel about said hot take. 8 wins this year. I think about 6 or 7 is probably the benchmark. Can they get to 8? Absolutely. It would just require South Carolina to pull off an upset or win a game that many are not thinking they can win. It starts with obviously winning the 4 games that should be guaranteed wins. Like I said before, Akron, Vanderbilt, Wofford, and Old Dominion should be wins. No question about it. If anything, if they lose one of those games or anything more, we got a lot of bigger problems to worry about here. It also starts with beating Kentucky, I feel like, and that is a huge, huge game that can really determine what the season looks like. Think about it this way. If September has been notoriously bad for South Carolina at the start of the year, they're usually a team that starts sluggishly and then plays a lot better as the year goes on. And I think with this team, you win that Kentucky game, first SEC game, second game of the year, you're 2-0 at that point. You're heading into a noon matchup with LSU, who would have already played Southern Cal, and I would assume win that game. So they'll probably be 2-0 too. But you never know. There's always trap games in college football. Maybe that's one of those. And so winning that Kentucky game is massive, in my opinion. And then you can find a way to win at least one of your other 7 games on the schedule. 2,000 rushing, I think it can happen. Like all in all, you include every single possible running back in that list? Most definitely. I don't think anyone is going to single-handedly get that number on their own, but a combined effort for sure. So I definitely buy that as well. 3,000 passing yards. I don't know. I'm going to say sell on that because it's not that I don't think Lenore Sellers or Robbie Ashford are good quarterbacks. And I'm speaking about this from an individual standpoint of whoever starts, not as a unit, I guess, at quarterback. I think 3,000 passing yards is something that's tough to do. Spencer Rattler got over it by a little bit last year. I think he hit about 3,100. And that was with a bad offensive line and no running game. I think the run game is going to heavily be involved for South Carolina this year and what they do, offensively speaking. And it's not to say that there will be limited passing opportunities. There's going to be plenty. But I think the run game is really going to carry this team in 2024. And got a question here from Matt Sellers who says, when does Beamer speak next? He's speaking to the media on Saturday. We do not have an exact time yet, but it'll be after South Carolina's scrimmage. So I would say, if I had to guess, later afternoon, probably look at maybe around 4:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30-ish range. But once we have an ideal time sent from media relations with South Carolina, we'll have that updated. But and then the last part of this one from Mac 1906, 25 points per game allowed on defense. We'll have to see. I think depending on the week, it's possible, but I think there's going to be games on the schedule where South Carolina probably gives up a good chunk of points. But I do think this defense will be much improved. Next hot take comes from Celtic Riot, who says, I don't know if this is hot, but I think this team finds a way to win 8 games, whether it be in the regular season or with a bowl. Yeah, like I said before, I think this team can get to 6 or 7 wins. And if they are in a position where they're at 7 wins in the regular season, I think they can get to 8 in the bowl game because it'll be probably against an equal level playing field opponent. And I think they can get to 8 that way. I think, like I said, I think the ceiling for this team, if we're talking cap on wins this year, 8, maybe 9. 9 feels like a good bit for this team coming off a 5-win year. But again, last year doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things because it is what it is last year. You lost guys, a lot of new guys on the team, some returning veterans and such. But I think the makeup of this team is very different compared to last year. Gamecock Bree says defense will finish in the top half of the SEC in several categories. I'm going to say buy on that. I think the defense will be very solid this year. I don't expect the defense to be bottom half in many categories, but we'll have to see. Next hot take from Gamecock Bree says Lenoris will win us a game or 2 that we are not expected to win by putting the team on his shoulders. Buy. Literally buy. I would say if I'm picking one game, he's going to carry the team on his shoulders. I think Kentucky's definitely for sure going to be one, just because we won't know how the running game looks yet by that point. But Lenoris, we know, can be a really solid player. And then probably the Clemson game, I would say, would have to be a game where he really steps up. Next hot take from Gamecock Bree, there's 4 of them here. Rocket gives us an offensive dimension that makes it difficult for teams to match up against us. Having a true fast running back and a quarterback who can run and pass will pay dividends. Big buy there. Definitely think with those 2 guys and the other running backs in the room with what Sellers and maybe Ashford can do in the run game. I think, like I've kept saying it this entire time, running game going to be dynamic this year, going to be special to watch, I think. And then the last take, 7-5 or 8-4, not enough talent yet to beat the big guys, but a transfer portal class away from reaching a next level. Totally agree. Big buy there. The next hot take comes from Mac C Main 12, who says South Carolina will be fighting for a playoff berth in November. So I hate to be that guy, and I think there's a lot of realists out there that watch this football team, especially in the fandom. I don't see it this year. Playoff berth, you're talking about the best of the best in college football. And considering there's probably going to be a lot of teams that are 12-0, 11-1, 10-2, I think it's going to be really hard for South Carolina to be one of those teams. Now, could they potentially be going into November with a chance? If things kind of go right for them to start the year, and maybe you're like 4-0 going into the Ole Miss game, and you win that one, you're 5-0, and you're probably ranked by that point, then it's like, okay, the talk might be heating up a little bit. But for right now, I'm going to say sell. Next one comes from MB Simmons, who says, our jet sweep will be lethal. LB play will be the best since the Brinkley era. We will lead the nation in INTs. Lead the nation in interceptions. So I think, I don't know. I think South Carolina's done a very good job creating turnovers and interceptions in Shane Beamer's first 3 years as head coach. Last year was a little bit of a step back. This year, they've got some guys that are still competing for spots at DB and in the secondary and on that D line. It's very much possible that they can go out there and lead the nation in interceptions. But we're talking, it's not just SEC we're talking about. We're talking about, in general, top of the line in all of college football. It's a high bar to set, but I'm with it. I like it, but I'm have to sell on it. Jet sweep will be lethal. In the college football video game here, I've used the jet sweep quite a bit, and I like what I'm seeing so far. You got a guy like AHB, Gage Larvadane, maybe Nick Harbor that can do it. If executed correctly, if blocked correctly, you can make it happen, in my opinion. I'll buy that. And then LB play will be the best since the Brinkley era. Yeah, I would say linebacker play will be good this year. You got guys like Bam Martin Scott, Debo Williams, guys like that. There's other guys that I'm just forgetting off the top of my head here. But the LB room, I feel like, is one of the stronger ones for the defense. And in Debo Williams is, probably his final year. He looks like a guy that I think is going to take over once again defensively for this group. And we've got one of these hot takes from JP here. Most sacks in the SEC for the D. Yeah, I think I got asked about this in my story, and y'all go check that out if you haven't yet. I think I can't remember what the take was exactly, but it was something to where like South Carolina was going to finish top 3 in the SEC in sacks, maybe. Most sacks in the SEC, potentially, but I'm going to have to sell on that. And then we got a lot of hot takes here from 843 TJS Dad, and that is our guy, Travis Edwards, who did say he came through with the heat. I'm buying into the heat. You got a lot of them, and I did answer a few of them in my story. Dylan Stewart being top 3 in the conference with 9 sacks, I could see it. That's definitely a big buy. His get off, his explosion, everything he does. I feel like a lot of O-lines are going to underestimate what he can do because he's a freshman and they haven't seen a lot of him. I think it really works out for him, and he gets a lot of sacks this year. Lead the conference in sacks? I don't know. I don't buy it. I'm going to sell it. Defense finishes top 5 in conference. I think I did answer this one. And I believe I did say buy, although it's a cautious buy because, again, what's the defense going to look like this year? They've looked good so far, it seems like, but can they do it consistently? That remains to be seen. So a cautious buy there. South Carolina's going to average 200 rushing yards a game. Sell. So I don't see that. They're going to run the ball a lot, but to average 200 a game, I feel like, I'm talking about the running game being a very heavy force for South Carolina's offense this year, but don't get it twisted. They're going to throw the ball a good bit. And so I think you're going to see a good mix of Lenore Sellers throwing the rock, but also Rocket Sanders, Oscar Attaway, guys like that. They're going to be running it. But I do think there'll be a decent split. If I had to guess, I would say maybe like a 55-45 split with the run game being more implemented and the passing game being that 45. We're going to average 35 points a game. Sell. I don't know about that. I don't know. I would like to think if South Carolina could score 35 points a game consistently, my hat's to them. That is a very dynamic offense then and shows that they can be very, very good. But 35 points a game, I think there's going to be some games where you just lay an egg against an Alabama and Oklahoma, maybe an Ole Miss too, but I think South Carolina's going to be fired up for that game. I think that's probably the one upset I would pick for sure this year is Ole Miss. But in terms of what they're going to do with points per game, some of those other games where they might not score a ton will drag them down a little bit. But I do think they can be a pretty good offense this year. And Travis Edwards brings up a good point. Sean Elliott offenses have had 200 rush yards per game, 7 of his last 8 years. I think at Georgia State. Sean Elliott is the run game coordinator for South Carolina this year. And I do expect him, Mark Blackwell, Dowell Loggins, Shane Beamer, everyone involved in this offense to make a good, strong effort to get this run game right. And look, if Rocket's healthy, if everyone stays healthy, I don't know. We could see 200 rushing yards per game. I'm going to loosely sell on that, actually. And I'm not ruling it out completely, but it does feel like a high number to get to. But we'll see. Still another take here from Travis. End the season with no less than 9 wins. I did answer this one. I'm selling on it. I don't think they get to 9 wins. We'll see what happens. South Carolina's going to have 4 freshmen All-Americans: Lenoris, Mazio Bennett, Dylan Stewart, and Vicari Swain. I like that take. I would depends on how the rest of the league looks. I would say loosely buy. I'm going to say Lenoris, I feel like, can be an All-American. Mazio Bennett, it depends on how much playing time he gets. And this is something I did talk about in the story. If he gets enough playing time, he could be a guy that's a factor this year for this offense. And right now, I don't know, because there's a lot of vets in that room, a lot of other guys that I think are going to be ahead of him on the depth chart. But eventually, I do feel like he'll get his chance. And if he does get enough playing time and shines, you never know. Dylan Stewart, I feel like he can definitely be an All-American type guy. And then Vicari Swain, if he wins that DB battle and plays a lot this year, you never know, man. It's very possible. Start 5-0. There's another hot take here. Let's see. Old Dominion, yes, it's a win. Kentucky, I would say, is a win. LSU, God, I don't know, man. They're gonna lose a game at some point. That's the thing with this team, is like, in my head, I think they can go 5-0 in those first few weeks, especially coming into a bye week, and then having to play Ole Miss afterwards. It's possible, but those 2 games, LSU and Kentucky, if you have to win those games, and if you get those wins, you could definitely go 5-0. But I think that's a little bit of wishful thinking right now. So I'm going to say sell. And then we play Georgia. Is the last hot take here from Travis Edwards. That means you have to play them in the SEC title game. Giant sell. Don't see this team making the SEC title game. Not with how good this conference is. And then we got just a few more here. There's a spicy hot take here. South Carolina's going to start the season 4-1, 7-5 record. Losses: Ole Miss, Bama, Missouri, A&M, Clemson, upset LSU, and Oklahoma. I'll buy it. I think you could definitely see a few losses on the schedule. I think Ole Miss is one of them. You could probably see Alabama. I think that's a loss. Missouri, I don't know what Missouri's going to look like yet this year. Same deal, Texas A&M and Clemson. Those are my toss-up games, but it is possible South Carolina could lay an egg in a few of those weeks. But LSU and Oklahoma, definitely do not bookmark those as losses for South Carolina yet. You never know what can happen, and I do think those are 2 that if things go the right way and if things are clicking, you never know. The second take here is finishing the top 5 in the SEC in overall defense. I already said that before. I'll cautiously buy it. And then this is something I did answer in the story as well. Rocket and Oscar Attaway combined for 1,500 rushing yards. Big buy. And then one of the last ones here we're going to talk about is from Black Magic 93, who has a hot takes on 4 different things here. South Carolina's going to beat LSU at home. I'll cautiously buy it. South Carolina's going to beat Oklahoma on the road. I'll cautiously buy it. South Carolina will break its 5-game losing streak to Missouri. I'm going to cautiously buy it. I don't know, man. It's possible, but at the same time, and Matt Sellers brings up a great point. 5-0 seems just as possible as 2-3. Again, this team is a wild card. You never know what you're going to get on a week-to-week basis. South Carolina could lose a game to Alabama 63-0 this year and then go out there and beat Oklahoma the next week. That's kind of just what this program's been over the last few years. They win when you least expect it, and they lose when you think they got it. So I think that's kind of what I've seen from Carolina over the years. Again, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's kind of just how I feel. But I do think South Carolina definitely can break the losing streak to Missouri this year. If the Tigers are any bit as good as last year, this is going to be an easy sell. But right now, I'm going to say cautiously buy, just because we don't know for sure if Missouri will be that type of team again. We'll have to see. And then the last one here, South Carolina will be 2-0 in as many games at Clemson. So I think that the question kind of references the fact that South Carolina is going to go out there and beat Clemson again on the road for the second trip to Death Valley in a row. I could see it happening. Give me a buy on that. And I think that is going to do it for all the hot takes. Again, I appreciate all of you that went on the Insiders Forum, I think starting on Monday, and commented your best hot takes for the 2024 season. I would love to do something like this again, just because it is something really fun and interesting to talk about. It seems like a lot of you guys have really enjoyed it. And whether you think my takes are good or bad, or whether I buy or sell them, I mean, it's up to your interpretation. I'm just answering as best as I can, and I hope you guys enjoy, this side of it where we're talking about all these hot takes and stuff. But that, I think, is going to do it for this week, or for today's episode of GC Live. I believe Wes and Chris might be back. I'm not sure for sure yet, but it seems like they'll be going live tomorrow. So be sure to keep an eye out for that. If not, we'll be back in action on Saturday as Shane Beamer speaks to the media after South Carolina's second scrimmage of fall camp. I'll be there providing live updates and coverage, and have some stories from that afterwards. So be sure to stay locked into GamecockCentral.com for all coverage, stories, videos, all that stuff. We're having a good time over there. And football season, it's not far away. 16 days till the season opener for the Gamecocks against Old Dominion. It's going to be a lot of fun. Take care, guys. Have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend.